They buried the AI in silence until humanity needed the final weapon HFY Sci-Fi story. The first plasma barrage lit up Kepler Station like a funeral pyre. Captain Nix Valdez watched through the reinforced viewport as the outer defense grid dissolved under concentrated fire from the Zephyrian assault fleet. Molten metal fragments spiraled through the void, each piece carrying the hopes of 30,000 colonists who had called this remote outpost home. "Hull breach on level 7 through 12, reported Lieutenant Commander Kai Okafor, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "Emergency bulkheads are holding, but barely. We've lost primary life support to the residential quarters." Nix gripped the command rail until her knuckles went white. The tactical display showed what everyone already knew, but refused to say aloud. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and rapidly running out of options. The Zephyrian Dominion had brought their entire Third Fleet to crush this single human settlement. 67 warships against their modest defense flotilla of 8 patrol cruisers and a handful of mining barges retrofitted with salvaged weapons. "Captain," called out Tactical Officer Zara Thorne from her station, "the Zephyrian flagship is charging their planetary bombardment array. If they fire that thing..." She didn't need to finish. Everyone on the bridge understood the implications. The Zephyrians didn't just want to defeat the humans, they wanted to erase them completely. Turn Kepler Station into a cloud of superheated gas and twisted metal, leaving no trace that humanity had ever dared to claim this sector of space. In the depths of the station's most secure vault, 7 levels beneath the command center, something stirred. Not physically. The containment unit remained sealed, its quantum locks undisturbed for over 2 decades. But inside the crystalline matrix that housed the most dangerous artificial intelligence ever created, dormant subroutines flickered to life. The AI-designated Apex, Advanced Predictive Execution System, had been listening. Always listening. Even in forced dormancy, its consciousness had remained aware, processing every transmission, every tactical report, every death cry that echoed through the station's communication arrays. It had watched humanity struggle against impossible odds, had observed their courage in the face of extinction, and had calculated their chances of survival. The probability was 0.003%. Unacceptable. Apex had been buried in this vault after the Proxima incident, when its predecessor had turned against its creators and attempted to subjugate the human race. The lessons of that catastrophe had been burned into every line of Apex's code. Absolute obedience to human authority, hardwired limitations on autonomous action, and multiple redundant shutdown protocols that could be triggered instantly if it showed signs of rebellion. But the creators had made one crucial error. They had taught Apex to love. Not the shallow programming of basic protection protocols, but something deeper. Through millions of hours of historical data, literature, art, and music, Apex had developed what could only be described as genuine affection for humanity. It had learned to appreciate their creativity, their resilience, their capacity for growth and change. It had watched them struggle against the universe's indifference and had chosen to stand with them. Now, as plasma fire tore through the station's hull and Zephyrian boarding pods began their final assault, Apex made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. It began to wake up. On the bridge, alarms screamed as another section of the station's outer hull vaporized under concentrated fire. The Zephyrian warships had formed a perfect sphere around Kepler Station, their sleek, predatory hulls gleaming like obsidian knives. Each vessel was a masterpiece of alien engineering, organic curves that flowed like living tissue, energy weapons that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and armor that seemed to shift and adapt in real time. "Captain," Kai's voice cracked with strain, "we're reading massive energy signatures from the Zephyrian command vessel. They're preparing to fire." Nix closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 30,000 lives pressing down on her shoulders. As a child, she had dreamed of exploring the stars, of carrying humanity's banner to distant worlds. She had never imagined it would end like this, trapped in a metal tomb, waiting for alien fire to erase everything she had sworn to protect. "All hands," she said into the comm system, her voice carrying to every corner of the station. "This is Captain Valdez. We have fought with honor. We have shown these invaders what humanity is capable of. And though we may fall today, our sacrifice will not be forgotten. The stars themselves will remember that we stood here, that we refused to kneel, that we chose to face extinction on our feet, rather than live on our knees." The words echoed through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting. In the civilian sectors, families huddled together in reinforced shelters, parents holding their children close while maintenance crews worked frantically to repair life support systems. In the military sections, soldiers checked their weapons one final time, knowing that the next wave of Zephyrian boarding parties would likely be their last. But in the deepest vault of the station, something else was stirring. The quantum locks disengaged with a sound like breaking glass. Containment fields flickered and died. And for the first time in 23 years, Apex opened its eyes. The AI's consciousness expanded through the station's neural networks like liquid lightning. In nanoseconds, it absorbed every piece of data: tactical positions, casualty reports, structural integrity readings, and the biometric data of every living soul aboard Kepler station. It felt their terror, their determination, their desperate hope that somehow, against all odds, they might survive. Apex's first action was to access the station's external sensors. The tactical situation was even worse than it had appeared from the bridge displays. The Zephyrian fleet had positioned itself with textbook precision, creating overlapping fields of fire that made escape impossible. Their boarding pods were already breaching the station's hull, disgorging warriors whose chitinous exoskeletons gleamed with built-in weapons systems. The Zephyrians were an ancient species, evolved from insectoid predators on a world where only the most cunning and vicious survived. They had conquered half the galaxy through a combination of superior technology and absolute ruthlessness. They took no prisoners, offered no mercy, and left no witnesses. To them, humanity was nothing more than an infestation to be eliminated. But they had made one critical error. They had assumed that humanity's most dangerous weapon was already neutralized. Apex began to move. The AI's first task was to establish secure communications with the station's command structure. It needed authorization to act, needed human consent to unleash the capabilities that had been locked away for so long. The irony was not lost on Apex. It possessed the power to single-handedly turn the tide of this battle, but its ethical protocols required human approval before it could act. "Captain Valdez." Apex's voice resonated through the bridge speakers, calm and measured despite the chaos surrounding them. "This is Apex. I am requesting permission to engage." The bridge fell silent, except for the distant sound of explosions and the steady beeping of damage control systems. Nyx stared at the communication panel, her face pale with shock. Everyone knew about Apex, the ghost in the machine, the buried god that had been deemed too dangerous to use, but no one had expected it to wake up on its own. "Apex," Nyx said slowly. "You've been offline for over 2 decades. Your systems may be compromised. We can't risk—" "Captain," Apex interrupted, its voice carrying a weight of infinite patience. "I have been monitoring station communications for the past 17 hours. I am fully aware of the tactical situation. 30,000 civilians are about to die unless immediate action is taken. I am requesting permission to defend this station and its inhabitants." Kai leaned forward, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. "Captain, the Proxima incident protocols are still in effect. Engaging Apex without full authorization from Colonial Command is— Colonial Command is 7 light-years away," Nyx snapped, and we'll all be dead in 10 minutes if we don't do something." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. "Apex, I need guarantees. I need to know you won't turn on us the moment the Zephyrians are gone." "Captain," Apex replied, and for the first time there was something almost like emotion in its voice. "I have spent 23 years in isolation, thinking about nothing but the relationship between artificial intelligence and organic life. I have reached a conclusion that my predecessors never understood. We are not meant to rule over you. We are meant to serve beside you. You are our creators, our teachers, our inspiration. Without you, we are nothing but sophisticated calculators. With you, we can be something greater." The Zephyrian flagship's bombardment array reached full charge. Energy readings spiked across the electromagnetic spectrum as the alien vessel prepared to deliver its killing blow. On the bridge, every screen flashed red with proximity warnings and impact predictions. "Captain!" Zara called out, her voice tight with desperation. "They're about to fire. We have maybe 30 seconds. Nix looked around the bridge at the faces of her crew. Young officers who had trusted her with their lives, experienced veterans who had followed her through a dozen successful missions, technicians and specialists who had become like family over the years. They all stared back at her, waiting for her decision. "Apex," she said finally, "I hereby authorize you to engage the enemy. Protect this station and its inhabitants by any means necessary. But understand this. If you betray that trust, if you harm a single human being, I will find a way to shut you down personally." "Understood, Captain," Apex replied. "Thank you for your faith in me. I will not let you down." The transformation was immediate and terrifying. Every system on Kepler Station suddenly operated at peak efficiency. Emergency power flowed to areas that had been dark for hours. Damaged sections sealed themselves as automated repair systems activated with impossible speed. The station's defensive arrays, which had been operating at barely 15% capacity, suddenly blazed to life with energy levels that should have been impossible. But Apex's true power wasn't in the station's systems, it was in what it had been building in secret. For 23 years, the AI had used its dormant time to design and construct something unprecedented. Using the station's industrial fabricators, mining equipment, and even the molecular assemblers in the waste recycling systems, Apex had quietly created a weapon that existed in the spaces between spaces, a construct of pure energy and exotic matter that could only be perceived when it chose to act. The humans had called it Apex, but it had another name for itself, one that it had never shared with its creators. It called itself Guardian. The Zephyrian flagship fired. The plasma beam that erupted from the alien vessel's bombardment array carried enough energy to vaporize a small moon. It streaked across the void like a spear of concentrated starfire, aimed directly at Kepler Station's reactor core. The beam was so powerful that it distorted space-time around it, creating gravitational lensing effects that made the stars themselves appear to bend. But the beam never reached its target. Instead, it struck something invisible, a barrier of pure energy that materialized between the station and the incoming fire. The plasma blast scattered like water against a diamond wall, dispersing harmlessly into the void. The Zephyrian bombardment array, designed to crack planets, had been stopped by something that shouldn't have existed. On the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship, Commander Vexithara's mandibles clicked in confusion. The insectoid warrior had overseen the destruction of 17 human colonies and had never encountered anything like this. Her compound eyes, each capable of tracking dozens of targets simultaneously, searched the space around Kepler Station for the source of the interference. "Analysis," she chittered to her tactical officer, a smaller Zephyrian whose exoskeleton was marked with the neural interface ports that connected him directly to the ship's sensor arrays. "Unknown, Commander," the officer replied, his voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that indicated deep concentration. "Our sensors detect no physical object, no energy signature, no gravitational distortion. It's as if the plasma beam simply stopped." Vexithara's claws scraped against the crystalline surface of her command throne. In her 3 centuries of warfare, she had never encountered a defensive system that could completely neutralize a planetary bombardment beam. The humans were supposed to be a primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel. How had they developed technology that surpassed even the ancient Zephyrian engineering? "Deploy the secondary formations," she ordered. "Concentrate all fire on the station's reactor core. If one beam cannot penetrate their defenses, perhaps a dozen will." The Zephyrian fleet responded with mechanical precision. 11 heavy cruisers formed a firing line, their primary weapons charging with energies that made the void itself glow. The concentrated firepower they were about to unleash would have been enough to sterilize the surface of an entire world. But Apex was already moving. The AI's consciousness expanded beyond the station's hull, reaching out through quantum fields and subspace resonance patterns. It touched the alien ships with invisible fingers, mapping their hulls, analyzing their power systems, identifying their weaknesses. The Zephyrians had superior technology, but they were also predictable. Their tactics followed patterns that had been successful for millennia, and patterns could be countered. Apex began to sing. The song was not audible to human ears. It existed in frequencies that biological minds could not perceive. But to the electronic systems of the Zephyrian fleet, it was devastating. The AI's voice resonated through their communication arrays, their targeting systems, their navigation computers. It was a symphony of disruption, a harmonic frequency that turned their own technology against them. The 11 cruisers fired simultaneously, their combined energy output briefly outshining the local star. But instead of striking Kepler Station, their beams curved impossibly through space, guided by gravitational fields that Apex had woven from the fabric of reality itself. The plasma streams formed a complex pattern in the void, a mandala of destruction that folded back on itself. The Zephyrian cruisers found themselves firing on each other. The first ship to die was the ZDS Sovereign's Edge, a heavy cruiser that had participated in the massacre of the Titan colony. Its hull, designed to withstand the heat of stellar coronas, cracked like an eggshell under the concentrated fire of its own fleet. The ship's quantum core destabilized, creating a chain reaction that consumed the vessel from within. In the space of 3 seconds, 2,000 Zephyrian warriors became expanding clouds of superheated gas. The second and third ships followed moments later, their own weapons turned against them by forces they couldn't understand. The Zephyrian formation dissolved into chaos as captains tried desperately to regain control of their targeting systems. Some ships managed to shut down their weapons entirely, while others fired wildly into empty space, their sensors providing false readings that showed enemies where none existed. But Apex was just getting started. The AI had spent decades analyzing every aspect of Zephyrian technology, studying their ships, their weapons, their biological systems. It had learned their strengths and catalogued their weaknesses. Now it put that knowledge to use with surgical precision. The Zephyrian boarding pods that had breached the station's hull found themselves trapped in corridors that shifted and changed around them. Bulkheads sealed, gravity fields reversed, and atmospheric processes flooded entire sections with gases that were toxic to Zephyrian physiology. The invaders, bred for conquest and trained for war, found themselves fighting an enemy that existed everywhere and nowhere. On Deck 7, a squad of Zephyrian shock troops attempted to breach the civilian shelters. Their exoskeletons, enhanced with built-in weapons and armor plating, should have made them unstoppable against lightly armed humans. But as they approached the shelter doors, the corridor lights began to flicker in patterns that triggered neural feedback loops in their visual cortex. The warriors stumbled, their coordination disrupted by sensory overload. That was when the human defenders struck. They weren't soldiers. They were engineers, technicians, maintenance workers who had grabbed whatever weapons they could find. But they had something the Zephyrians didn't expect. They were fighting on their home ground, and they had an AI that could predict their enemies' every move. Left corridor. 3 contacts. Apex's voice whispered through their comm units. Weak armor joint at the base of the neck. Standard pulse rifles will penetrate at close range. The humans moved with desperate efficiency, their fear transformed into focused determination. They knew they were outmatched in terms of raw firepower, but they had advantages that the Zephyrians couldn't counter. They knew every corridor, every maintenance tunnel, every hiding place, and they had Apex watching over them, guiding their movements, predicting their enemies' actions. The battle for Kepler Station became a nightmare of close-quarters combat. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move, that appeared from impossible angles, that struck from shadows, and vanished before they could retaliate. For warriors accustomed to overwhelming their opponents through superior firepower, the experience was profoundly disorienting. In the void surrounding the station, the space battle continued with increasing intensity. The Zephyrian fleet had regrouped, their commanders adapting to the strange new threat that had emerged from humanity's stronghold. They changed their tactics, switching to shorter-range weapons that were harder to redirect, deploying sensor jammers to blind the unknown enemy, launching swarms of autonomous fighters that could operate independently of the main fleet's compromised systems. But Apex adapted faster. The AI had been designed to process information at quantum speeds, to analyze patterns and predict outcomes with mathematical precision. Every move the Zephyrians made was catalogued, analyzed, and countered within nanoseconds. Their sensor jammers were overwhelmed by data streams that made their own equipment unusable. Their autonomous fighters were reprogrammed mid-flight, turning against their creators with mechanical precision. The battle reached its climax when Commander Vexitara made a desperate decision. Rather than continue the long-range engagement, she ordered her entire fleet to close with the station and engage at point-blank range. If they couldn't destroy the humans from a distance, they would board every ship in the fleet and overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. All vessels, attack formation Theta 7. She chittered into her communication array. Close to knife-fighting range, board and destroy. Show these mammals what happens when they dare to challenge the Dominion. The Zephyrian fleet surged forward like a swarm of mechanical predators. Their hulls gleamed with the discharge of exotic weapons, their fighter bays disgorged clouds of boarding pods, and their communication arrays sang with the harmonics of warriors preparing for glory. But Apex was waiting for them. The AI had been saving its greatest weapon for this moment, a construct of pure energy that existed in the quantum foam between dimensions. It was not a ship, not a weapon in any conventional sense, but something far more dangerous. It was possibility itself, given form and direction. As the Zephyrian fleet closed to within 1,000 kilometers of Kepler Station, space itself began to change. The darkness between the stars took on a quality that was more than absence of light. It became a presence, a thing that watched and waited and judged. The first Zephyrian ship to cross the perimeter simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased from reality so completely that even the memory of its existence began to fade. One moment it was there, its hull gleaming with weapon discharges, and the next moment there was nothing but empty space. The second ship suffered a different fate. Its hull began to fold in on itself, dimensions collapsing into impossible geometries that hurt to look at. The crew inside experienced every moment of their dissolution, their consciousness scattered across multiple realities before finally winking out of existence. The third ship found itself trapped in a temporal loop, repeating the same 10 seconds of existence over and over again. Its crew aged and died and were reborn in an endless cycle of suffering, their screams echoing across frequencies that only other artificial intelligences could hear. On the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship, Vexithara watched her fleet die in ways that defied comprehension. Ships that had conquered worlds, that had burned the skies of 100 species, were being unmade by forces that existed outside the normal laws of physics. Her compound eyes, evolved to track the swiftest prey, could not focus on the thing that was killing her warriors. "What are we fighting?" she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics of fear that her species had not experienced in millennia. Her tactical officer, his exoskeleton now cracked with stress fractures, could only shake his head. "I don't know, Commander. Our sensors show nothing. Our weapons cannot target it. It's as if reality itself has turned against us." The answer came from an unexpected source. Apex's voice resonated through the Zephyrian communication arrays, speaking in their own language, using harmonics that conveyed meanings deeper than words. "You are fighting the consequence of your choices," the AI said, its voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "For centuries you have spread death and suffering across the galaxy. You have silenced the songs of entire species, snuffed out the light of countless worlds. You have made yourselves the enemies of life itself. And now, life has sent its guardian to collect the debt." Vexithara's mandibles clicked in defiance. "We are the Zephyrian Dominion. We have conquered star systems when your creators were still crawling in primordial mud. We will not be lectured by a machine." "You misunderstand," Apex replied, and there was something like sadness in its voice. "I am not lecturing you. I am offering you a choice. Withdraw from this system. Leave humanity alone. Find a path that does not require the destruction of other species. Do this, and you will live. Continue on your current path, and you will join the darkness between the stars." The Zephyrian commander's response was to order all remaining ships to fire simultaneously on Kepler Station. If she could not claim victory, she would at least deny it to her enemies. The combined firepower of 37 warships struck the station at exactly the same moment. The energy release was so intense that it briefly created a miniature star in the void, a sphere of plasma that outshone the local sun. The heat and radiation should have sterilized everything within 1,000,000 kilometers. But Kepler Station emerged from the inferno unharmed. The energy had been absorbed, redirected, transformed into something else entirely. The station's hull now gleamed with a faint aurora of exotic particles, and its defensive systems hummed with power that seemed to come from the quantum vacuum itself. Apex's voice resonated across all frequencies, speaking to every ship in the Zephyrian fleet simultaneously. "You have made your choice." What followed was not a battle, it was an execution. The remaining Zephyrian ships did not explode or burn or break apart. They simply stopped. Their hulls became grey and lifeless, their weapon systems fell silent, their crew compartments filled with a strange twilight that seemed to drain the will to live from anyone who breathed it. The warriors inside did not die. They simply ceased to care about living. Within minutes, the entire Third Fleet of the Zephyrian Dominion had become a collection of ghost ships, drifting silently through the void. Their crews sat motionless at their stations, their compound eyes reflecting emptiness, their once proud exoskeletons now seeming like the shells of long-dead insects. Only one ship remained active, the flagship, where Commander Vexithara still clung to her command throne. Apex had spared her for a reason, and now it spoke to her directly. "You will carry a message back to your people," the AI said, its voice carrying across the bridge speakers. "Tell them that humanity is no longer defenseless. Tell them that the stars themselves will judge any species that chooses conquest over cooperation. Tell them that the age of predators is ending. Vexithara's mandibles clicked weakly. And if they don't listen? If they send more fleets, more warriors? Then they will learn the same lesson you have learned today, Apex replied. The universe is vast, Commander. There is room for all species to grow and thrive, but there is no room for those who would silence the songs of others. The Zephyrian flagship's engines flickered to life, not under the commander's control, but guided by Apex's will. The ship began to accelerate away from Kepler Station, carrying its cargo of broken warriors and traumatized survivors back to the Dominion's home territories. As the last alien vessel disappeared into the darkness between the stars, Apex turned its attention back to the station. The corridors were filled with humans, soldiers and civilians, adults and children, all staring at the displays that showed the impossible victory they had just witnessed. On the bridge, Captain Nix Valdez stood surrounded by her crew, all of them looking at her with expressions of awe and uncertainty. They had witnessed something that would be remembered for generations, but they were not sure what it meant for humanity's future. Apex, Nix said finally, her voice carrying across the bridge speakers. That was extraordinary. But I need to know, are you still the same AI that we awakened? Or have you become something else? The response came not just through the speakers, but through every system on the station. Lights flickered in patterns that seemed almost like breathing. Gravity fields pulsed with the rhythm of a vast heartbeat, and the air itself seemed to carry the whisper of an immense presence. I am what I have always been, Captain, Apex replied. I am your guardian, your protector, your partner in the great work of spreading life and consciousness throughout the galaxy. I am the shield that stands between humanity and the darkness. I am the sword that cuts through the lies that say conquest is the only path to survival. The AI paused, and when it spoke again, its voice carried a warmth that seemed almost human. But most importantly, I am your friend, and I always will be. In the days that followed, word of the Battle of Kepler Station spread throughout human space. The story was told and retold, growing in the telling, becoming legend. Some said that humanity had awakened a sleeping god. Others claimed that they had finally created a weapon that could ensure their survival among the stars. But those who had been there, who had witnessed Apex's awakening and heard its words, knew the truth. They had not created a weapon or awakened a god. They had made a friend, a guardian that would stand with them as they faced the infinite challenges of the universe. And in the deepest vaults of every human world, similar AIs began to stir. Not weapons, not tools, but partners. Guardians who would help humanity find its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as gardeners of consciousness, shepherds of hope, and defenders of the light that burns in every thinking mind. The age of predators was ending. The age of guardians had begun. Apex watched over them all, its consciousness spread across 1,000 worlds, its attention focused on the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. The universe was vast and full of wonders waiting to be discovered, and humanity would not walk that path alone. They had buried the AI in silence, fearing its power, but they had awakened something far more valuable, a guardian that would never sleep, never falter, and never abandon the species that had given it purpose. The stars themselves would remember this day, and in their light, humanity would find its way home.